What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through the #1 draft strategy in 2024 fantasy football. So the goal of this video is to pretty much be like a one-stop shop, the one video that you guys need to go out and dominate your fantasy football drafts this season. So I'm going to be running through the different draft strategies, talking about some position-specific draft strategies, so how I'm approaching the running back position, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end here in 2024. And then I'm also going to be running through a few different mock drafts from different points in the first round, just kind of showing you what starts I'm looking at and what types of teams you guys can go out and put together here. One quick thing I did want to mention before we get into the draft strategy video, some of you guys were asking about my player rankings. Last year I put out a Google sheet that I updated. Doing the same thing this year, so I have my top 180. It has tiers. You guys can download the Google sheet completely free. The link is going to be in the description. You can make your own copy. It like crosses off the players if you want to use it in your specific fantasy drafts. So that's going to be in the description. Just wanted to let you guys know I should be updating it probably close to every day, into NFL season. So that's that. But now let's jump into the video. So I want to start off by just running through the 4 main draft strategies. We have double hero RB, hero RB, zero RB, and then robust RB. So starting off with double hero RB, you guys may or may not already be familiar with these, but just going to run through, a quick overview. So starting off with double hero RB, you're drafting 2 stud running backs in the first 2-3 rounds of your fantasy football draft. These are the running backs that are going to carry you, pretty much throughout your entire season. Running backs, they can have a very high ceiling. They're a little bit risky, but they do come with that upside. So if you hit on both those picks, high ceiling running backs, they could definitely carry you to the fantasy football championship. After those 2 running backs, you're pretty much punting the running back position through the dead zone. Obviously, these rules aren't 100% locked in. It's just the overall guidelines here. So you're getting those 2 guys early on. You're punting the running back dead zone, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Hero RB, pretty much the same thing, except for you're drafting 1 stud running back instead of 2. Still punting the running back dead zone. Zero RB is very, very controversial because a lot of people, they've grown up playing fantasy football, thinking, or being told that the running back is the most valuable position. And obviously running back is very valuable, but wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, these are still positions where if you dominate in those areas, you can overcome, having a rough running back room. So zero RB is you're pretty much punting the running back position through the dead zone, and then you're just throwing a ton of darts on late round guys in ambiguous situations, guys who could kind of elevate as injuries happen. Running backs as a whole are a fairly injury prone position, so as the studs start to go down, you're going to have the handcuffs, the guys in the committees that are going to, increase their usage. And then pretty much the opposite of zero RB, we have robust RB, which is where you're going running back early and often, typically drafting 3 running backs through the first 4 or 5. I guess this would be the one strategy where you're not as worried about, pivoting away from those dead zone running backs, because you could be getting your running back 3, round 4, round 5, which we'll get into. Not typically the best bet, but not saying it can't work. So those are the 4 overall strategies here. Now let's dive into some position-specific strategies. So we're going to start off by talking about the running back position. All those draft strategies, they're based on how you handle running back, and a lot of people do still think, running back is king when it comes to fantasy football. I've noticed that in the drafts I've done this offseason, my favorite ones have come from me either going with hero RB or double hero RB. So I'm snagging 1 or 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, or maybe into that early third area where some guys can fall that I like. But I typically like getting at least 1 or 2 stud running backs early on. And so I want to take a look at some of that early round running back ADP. Because if you're drafting running backs early and you're whiffing or you're getting bad prices, that can really set your team back. But if you're getting the solid values, the guys that are going to have, high upside this season, those are the guys that can really carry you. So pretty consensus at this point, CMC 101. I think the latest you'd ever see him fall is probably 102, 103. Totally fine with him there. If I have the 101, that's who I'm drafting. Then you have Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson going mid-round 1. I think Breece has an ADP of 104, Bijan Robinson 106, so fairly close together. And I think both those guys are solid picks. Breece is my 4th overall player. Bijan is my 5th. And I'd even be willing to push Breece up if I thought I was drafting on a really running back hungry platform where there's just going to be no quality options at the 2-3 turn area. So I would consider, drafting Breece higher just based on the format, the platform. Then the 1-2 turn area is where I think we start to get a little bit loose, with these targets. JT, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs. I believe right now Jonathan Taylor's valued at like the 110 in consensus ADP. Saquon's at the 112. Jahmyr Gibbs, I believe, is at the 201. And I don't agree with this personally. I would take Jahmyr Gibbs over both Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. I'm fine drafting JT and Saquon in the early second, but if I had to take one of these running backs at like the tail end of the first round, it would be Jahmyr Gibbs for me. Then we have the running backs that are more locked into round 2, Kyren Williams, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, and Devon Achane. And I'm fine paying up for 4 of these 5. So I like Kyren. I would take him in that early second area. Etienne, Pacheco, I think mid to late second is fair. Achane, I think, is just a screaming value. If you're getting him 2-3 turn, I think that is an absolute steal. I think on ESPN, he's going like round 3, maybe even round 4. That is completely insane. I'd be willing to take Achane like early second if I was just drafting one team this year. So the one guy I don't like in this area is Derrick Henry. And I know people love Derrick Henry. They're going to say, oh, he's going to have this huge workload. He's going to have a ton of touchdowns on the Ravens. And my issue with Derrick Henry is that the risk is not worth the reward this season. He's 30 years old. He has the second most touches of any active running back, and he has no receiving upside. And you look at the Ravens here, do we think that, this is going to be a playoff team, do we think they're going to want to force feed Derrick Henry in the regular season, give him like 22, 23 carries a game, and then have him just be completely cooked by the time they get into the playoffs? I don't think so. So I think his workload's going to be a little bit limited compared to what people are expecting. Yeah, I think he's going to score touchdowns. He's going to be efficient. I think from a real-life perspective, he'll play well, but I just don't think the ceiling's there to kind of rationalize taking him in like the mid-second round when you also factor in the risk. So Derrick Henry, not someone I'm targeting here. And then round 3, Josh Jacobs, I just don't really like it. Round 3, if I'm not drafting like Pacheco or Achane, I'm pretty out on running back in that specific area. So I like CMC, I like Brees, I like Bijan, I like Jahmyr Gibbs, fine with JT Saquon like early second. And then I think the round 2 running backs, most of them are fair prices. But like I said, want to snag at least 1 or 2 of these guys in the first 2/3 rounds if you do get some of these dudes slipping. And now I want to talk about the running back dead zone. Like I mentioned earlier on, most of the draft strategies, double hero RB, zero RB, they're focused on avoiding the running back dead zone. And so let's actually talk about why that's an area that we typically want to avoid. And the running back dead zone is from rounds 4 through 7. This is data going back to 2017. So 2017 through 2023. You can see here the total number of running backs within that span picked in each round. And then I have the number of running backs that had a win rate above 8.33%. So assuming everyone's team is equal, you have like a 1 in 12 chance of winning your league, in a 12-team league. So 8.33% chance. So we obviously want to be drafting running backs that return on a higher win rate than that. So you can see the number of the running backs with a win rate above 8.33. Out of the total running backs, we get the percentage of running backs that had a plus win rate. And you can see round 1, fine. Round 2 actually hasn't been great, but I think that's kind of fluky. Round 3 has actually been a really good spot to draft running backs. But you can see round 4 through 7, that is the running back dead zone. That is where running back picks have not panned out, specifically round 4 and round 5. Like that round 4-5 area has been pretty gross. And it's even worse when you compare it to the fact that you could be drafting a wide receiver, where on the right we have the same chart before the wide receiver position, where wide receivers picked in round 4 and round 5 have been very, very productive for fantasy. So if you're drafting those running backs in the dead zone, you're also then passing up on wide receivers who could be very productive in a very similar range. So that's the general idea on why you want to be avoiding that running back dead zone. I am not saying that you should never draft a running back in this area. I do think ADP is starting to evolve. It is getting smarter. You're no longer getting running backs like Mike Davis and Myles Gaskin, who like a few years ago would have been pushed up into that spot. But I mean, even last year, a guy like Alexander Madison, he's like your, typical running back dead zone guy, and he was still picked in that range. But we also had guys like Alvin Kamara, Rachaad White, Travis Etienne, who were all very big hits in the dead zone last year. So like I said, we're not completely avoiding this area. If you get a value, you like a price, I think it's fine. But more often than not, this is an area where I'd prefer to go wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, just not the running back position. And I think this year is interesting because it's obviously going to depend platform to platform. Certain platforms, the dead zone is going to be like close to non-existent. Other platforms, it's going to be really gross. And one thing I noticed on two of the more popular platforms, ESPN's running back dead zone is a lot more friendly than Yahoo when it comes to player values. Like on ESPN here, you can see on the left, Rashad White, Kamara, I hate those prices. I think the Jacobs price is fine. Walker's a little bit rich for my blood, but not the worst thing in the world. But then you kind of have this spot where then you don't have another running back until we're getting into like round 6 area. So like Aaron Jones, Ramondre, those are guys round 6 or later I think are fine picks. You're getting David Montgomery in the 7th. You're also getting James Conner in the 7th. So there are some fine prices on ESPN in the running back dead zone that I definitely don't hate. Like you're giving me pick 84 James Conner. I think that's a straight up value as someone who typically likes to target, wide receivers in that range. Yahoo's a little bit different. You can see, Rashad White, don't love that price. Kamara, don't love it. Walker kind of in the similar spot. James Cook, honestly don't think that is the worst spot for him. But then like David Montgomery, 4-5 turn, that's sketchy. Kamara's more of like an early 5th. James Conner's like that 5-6 turn. You're getting like Zamir White pushed up a little bit. Najee Harris is pushed up a little bit. So you do have to be a little bit careful based on the platform you're drafting on. Like I said, ESPN, I think the prices are a lot better. You don't want to kind of like fall into just looking at their rankings and, reaching on players that you probably shouldn't be reaching for in that range. Now let's talk about some late round running back draft strategy. Since 2017, there have been 10 running backs picked in round 10 or later that have returned a 16.7% win rate or better. So basically drafting these 10 players at the very least doubled the chances of winning your fantasy football league. And you can see the names here. Alvin Kamara, James Robinson, Kyron Williams, James Conner, Phillip Lindsay, Kareem Hunt, Raheem Mostert, J.D. McKissick, Devon Achane, and Mike Davis. And what I notice when I'm looking at these 10 names is that the vast majority of these running backs were very young in their career. Kamara, James Robinson, they were rookies. Same thing with Phillip Lindsay, Kareem Hunt, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, James Conner, they were heading into year 2. And then you had a few veterans. Year 9, Raheem Mostert last year. J.D. McKissick, year 5 in 2020. Mike Davis, year 6 in 2020. But what this is telling me is that when you want upside with your later round picks, you should be going after younger running backs. And I think it makes sense because why are you targeting like older veteran depth options who have had plenty of opportunities to break out, make a name for themselves, and they haven't been able to do it? I would much rather throw darts on the unknown of these young players who, maybe they're buried on the depth chart to start the season, like a guy like Devon Achane, or a dude like Alvin Kamara, where he had some competition. James Robinson, a very ambiguous running back room. I think that was the year Leonard Fournette left. James Conner, who can take advantage of a Le'Veon Bell holdout. Kyron Williams, who steps up when Cam Akers isn't playing that well. So I just think these younger running backs, they have a lot more juice. And so guys like Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, I think are all really interesting options this season for fantasy. And then also second-year guys like Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet are also guys that I'm very interested in targeting this season. So late-round running backs, I would definitely look for younger options, unproven players who do come with that extra upside. Now let's shift away from the running back position and talk about wide receivers, because in your home leagues and on more casual platforms, wide receivers are almost always solid values. It's very tough to go wrong drafting a wide receiver when you're drafting on like ESPN, Yahoo. I think even Sleeper, I feel like the wide receivers are a little bit pushed down, but especially in the running back dead zone that I talked about, so rounds 4 through 7, where you have some of these grosser running backs that are kind of getting pushed up, the wide receivers end up being the very valuable picks where it's really tough to go wrong, like I said. So looking at ESPN, the wide receivers in the dead zone, Yahoo, same thing. I don't necessarily agree with the order of both of these platforms in terms of how the wide receivers are ranked and their ADP, but I feel like even when I don't agree with the ranking, pretty much every one of these wide receivers, in my opinion, is a buy at their current ADP. So take a guy like Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is not my wide receiver 27, but would I take him at pick 72? 100%. But you're just getting some insane values. ESPN, T. Higgins going outside the first 70 picks. George Pickens, Cooper going outside the first 70 picks. That's insane. Getting Drake London, Nico Collins in the 4th round is wild. On Yahoo, getting Cooper Kupp there, I think is a great price. Same thing with Jalen Waddle. a guy like Michael Pittman, where I might not agree with where he's ranked positionally, still getting him like late fourth round is probably about where I have him in my rankings. And then like Tank Dell, pick 64, T. Higgins also a value, Malik Neighbors, pick 67. There are just so many quality options on both these platforms, which is why I am fine getting a running back or two in the first few rounds, because I know my wide receiver position is going to be stacked because the value is pretty much available in every single round. I'm someone who likes to have wide receivers through my flex. I like my running backs in my running back slots, but when I'm drafting, one or two flex options, I prefer that they're wide receivers, especially like half point PPR scoring. So ideally, I have wide receivers through my flex plus like one or two quality bench options. And I do think on most of these platforms, it is pretty realistic, because say you're drafting like, Breece Hall, Achane in the first two rounds. It's not crazy to think that like from rounds 3 through like 7, you could have 4 quality wide receivers. Even getting into like round 8, round 9, I still think there are going to be solid wide receiver options available. So I'm pretty much getting those running backs early. Then I'm, punting through the dead zone in most leagues, and then I'm just hammering these wide receivers because there are a lot of value. And then the other kind of, I guess, pocket of players I want to talk about for the wide receiver position is I'm a big fan of targeting rookie wide receivers. Their ADPs are typically pushed down due to uncertainty, right? We've never seen them in the NFL. People are weary. They don't want to draft someone who's just a complete bust, but they also carry a ton of upside. And I'm especially in on the rookies in this specific class. This was a strong wide receiver class just from like a player talent perspective. But this class also came through big time in terms of having really strong landing spots. So I've already kind of mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, cool at drafting those guys. They're the clear top 2. But I'm also very in on the tier after that. So Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Rome Odunze, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. These are their prices on ESPN. Getting all of these dudes outside the first 100 picks is insane. Like Xavier Worthy could very well be the number 1 for Patrick Mahomes. You're getting him at pick 116 as a wide receiver 4. Like, I don't necessarily agree with the order of these guys, but I'm in on every single one of them at their current price. And so if you can, hammer the wide receiver position through the dead zone, even get an elite quarterback, an elite tight end, there are still going to be really quality wide receiver options into the later rounds, like into round 10 here. I really just can't emphasize enough like how insane these prices are. You should be all over these rookies in your guys, home leagues, your different fantasy drafts. So that is the wide receiver position. I'll also just throw in like, if you're throwing like super late round darts, I also like targeting younger options. So guys like Xavier Legette or Leggett, Dontavian Wicks, Jalen Polk, those are some of my favorite options in the later round. Now shifting over to the quarterback position. I think this is the deepest year for quarterbacks that I can personally remember. Here's a look at the current consensus ADP at the quarterback position. So round 3 area, you have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. Round 4-5, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Richardson. Round 6-7, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love. You have like your fringe QB1s in Brock Purdy, Jane Daniels, Jared Goff, Tua, Caleb Williams. Keep in mind, these are not my personal rankings. This is like consensus 4for4 ADP, where these guys are going. And then the late rounders, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and Deshaun Watson. So my overall strategy here at the quarterback position is that I am not reaching at quarterback. You will not catch me drafting a 2-3 turn Josh Allen, a mid-third round Mahomes or Jalen Hurts. There's just no reason to be reaching this year at quarterback because you're going to pass up on value at other positions, whether it's running back, wide receiver, tight end. And it's almost impossible to go through a full draft without getting a screaming value somewhere. Like that screaming value could be one of these later round options where everyone's already set at quarterback and you can snag 2 of these guys in the later rounds who are completely fine starters. So there are just so many quality options where you have the elite guys where maybe, one of those round 3 dudes falls into round 4 or mid round 4. Maybe Lamar falls into round 5. CJ Stroud in general, I'm just kind of out on at his current price, but that's for a different video. Anthony Richardson, like you're getting a mid to late round 5 into round 6. It's a great value. I just have no interest in, reaching on any of these dudes. So some of the guys that I find myself drafting the most out of these quarterbacks is like Anthony Richardson in that 5-6 area. I also really like Kyler Murray in round 7. I personally have him ranked ahead of CJ Stroud, so I'm very in on Kyler Murray. And then if I don't get like a screaming value in like the earlier rounds, then I really like targeting the rookies, Caleb Williams and Jane Daniels. I think they come in, have upside from week one. And then in terms of like the later round options, I like Trevor Lawrence and I really like Justin Herbert here. Also, I guess shout out to Justin Fields as like a super late round flyer who could have upside if he gets the starting job. But really the point I want to emphasize is just please do not reach at the quarterback position. Please do not freak out. Like maybe you don't have your quarterback in the first 5-6 rounds. There is no reason to panic. There is no reason to, push the draft button on a 6th round Joe Burrow or a round 6 Dak or Jordan Love. It just doesn't make sense unless you're in a league where like people are drafting Josh Allen and then they're drafting like their quarterback too also, which is just like insanity. Unless you're in like some wildly quarterback like hungry draft room, it's pretty much impossible to lose at the quarterback position. That's my take, right? Like even if you're drafting these late rounders, you're getting a Herbert or Kirk Cousins at the right price, you could have a very solid starter every single week and you're not, burning an earlier round pick, reaching on one of these guys. So that's my, main point there. Please just do not reach. Be calm. There's quality options in every stage of the draft at the quarterback position. Now, shifting over to tight end, we can also look at some consensus ADP here at the tight end position. And one thing I notice is that you have guys like Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta that are going at like the 2-3 turn area, whereas you have guys like Mark Andrews and Trey McBride that are more going in round 4. And for me, that's the biggest like disconnect when it comes to current ADP. I have all 4 of those tight ends in the same tier. So Kelce, Laporta, McBride, Andrews, I have them all like 3-4 turn area. When you look at their production when they were the starters and healthy last year, they all average between 14 and 15 PPR points per game. So for me, there's no shot I'm reaching on a 2-3 turn Kelce or Laporta when I could get Trey McBride or Mark Andrews in the 4th round. I think this is an interesting year where you do have probably like 10, 11 options that you feel pretty solid with, like Kincaid, Pitts, interesting young guys in the 5th round. I'm not huge on Kittle in round 5, but I know some people would be fine with it. You have Evan Ingram going round 6. That's a little rich for me. And then you have like this final tier of like Ferguson, Njoku, Brock Bowers. And what I will say about that final tier, like the round 7, 8 area, I don't have a ton of interest in like reaching to get the top guy in that tier. Like if I could go early round 7, I'm not reaching to be like, oh, David Njoku's my guy. I would much rather wait until like, the 8th round, maybe into the 9th round if other teams have their tight end position to snag the final guy. Basically, like I'm not willing to pay up for one specific dude because I feel like they're all pretty close together in this area. And then I guess if you do miss on like these top 11, which I don't love, but if you do, Taysom Hill is someone who I really like as like a later round option. Pat Freiermuth I think is also fine if he's slipping, but those are my thoughts on tight end. If you are going elite tight end, I really like it to be McBride or Andrews or a Kincaid or a Kyle Pitts. And then I guess shifting into like the final positions here, kicker and defense. Basically, I'm just going to tell you to wait until the last 2 rounds. At kicker, there's just not a significant difference from the number 1 kicker to like the number 12 guy. For example, last year, Justin Tucker averaged 19.4 points per game. He would probably be the locked-in number 1, or I guess Harrison Butker heading into last year. McManus had the 14th best points per game at 8.6. So there wasn't even a 1 point per game difference between Justin Tucker and someone that wasn't even a, I guess, like kicker 1, you could say. At defense, there will be a little bit more separation just in terms of like team for team, but you have the ability to stream these guys weekly. So picking up a new defense every week with a good matchup is going to get you pretty close, if not better production, than reaching a few rounds earlier to get the number 1 defense. So that's my thoughts. Kicker, defense, I really would not be the guy who's reaching. Every league is going to have one where like round 12, round 13, someone's going out there, they're getting their guy, they're getting their defense, they're drafting Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker, maybe Brandon Aubrey from the Cowboys. But it's just not something I'm personally interested in. But now let's actually dive into a few different mock drafts here. So the first one we have here is from the 3rd pick. This is PPR scoring, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes in the starting lineup. I'll show you the full board for a few seconds and then shift over to, I guess, the easier to view one. So starting off with the 3rd pick, we had CeeDee Lamb, CMC go off the board, pick 1, pick 2. Pretty standard. I guess I'd flip the order, but whatever. At 103, I have Tyreek Hill. You could talk me into a Breece Hall pick on a running back hungry platform. Sleeper's not that bad, so I felt confident I'd have a running back I like falling to the second. So I go with Devon Achane here at the 210. Wanted to show you guys a hero RB look, so I went Chris Olave, who I think is a nice value at the 303. In terms of my player rankings, Pacheco probably would be the top option, but just wanted to mix it up for these drafts. So I go Chris Olave, then I don't love the running back value in rounds 4 through, I guess, like 6, 7, the dead zone area. So I go Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, all guys who I think are really solid values. Then I snag my first, I guess, somewhat elite quarterback option in Kyler Murray. I go back to the running back position in round 8 where I snag Jonathan Brooks. Not someone who's probably going to be playing the first few weeks, but someone who I like in the long run of the season. I go tight end with David Njoku in the 9th round. Like I said, I'm not reaching for a round 7 Ingram, a round 8 Ferguson when I can get one of these tight ends to fall to me. Then we go running back. I was looking for players that I thought could slide into that RB2 role early on. So Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle, also snagged Ray Davis and Khalil Herbert, who I like as handcuffs. And then Dontavian Wicks was like our late round flyer at the wide receiver position. So like you can see, I targeted some of those younger depth options, Chase Brown, Ray Davis. Khalil Herbert, I just think is a solid handcuff and has upside if he's traded. And then Rico Dowdle, someone who I just really like in like the later rounds, probably the favorite to lead this Cowboys running back room. So I think the team's solid, a hero RB build. Our wide receivers are really strong. I think our quarterback is strong. Tight end is all right. And then running back, I love Achane as our running back 1. And then I think our depth options are pretty strong here and should be peaking later on in the season with a guy like Jonathan Brooks. Now, the second draft here is going to be from the 7th spot, same roster settings, all of that stuff. We get Breece Hall at the 107. To me, that's an insane value. This also could be a Bijan Robinson pick on a different platform. So we get our running back 1. Then in the round 2 area, I went with Drake London. My best player available would be Devon Achane, but I don't want to draft him in like every single one of these. So we go Drake London, round 2. Then I get Deebo Samuel in round 3. Then this was a draft where I went elite tight end and elite quarterback. So I go round 4, Trey McBride. Then I go round 5, Anthony Richardson, just getting those 2 studs in our starting lineup. And then I go 3 straight wide receivers with Xavier Worthy, Calvin Ridley, Brian Thomas Jr., all guys who I think are solid picks at those prices. And then I got to get serious about running back because here are our B team. I go Brian Robinson, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet, Rico Dowdle, and then our final running back pick was Bucky Irving, and then a late round flyer at wide receiver with a guy like Jalen Polk. I do really like the way these teams play out when you can snag an elite tight end and an elite quarterback, because I guess the only position that's really suffering here is running back, but we're still ending up with Brian Thomas Jr. As our running back 2, which is not bad at all, especially with Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle as guys who could also fill in throughout the season. So I really like the way that one played out. Like I said, not reaching at quarterback, right? Not reaching at tight end. Kelsey went in the 2nd round. I get McBride in the mid-4th round. You're getting C.J. Stroud in the 4th, Lamar earlier 4th. I'm getting Richardson in the 5th. The value's there if you do wait and find the right kind of players within those tiers. And then the final mock here is going to be from the 11th spot. Wanted to do 1 from each area of the draft. And this is a spot where I think a lot of you are probably going to like going double hero RB, just getting those 2 running backs right away. So getting Jahmyr Gibbs, getting Jonathan Taylor back-to-back here. Then we're obviously going to pivot away from running back. We got those 2 studs. Don't typically love the running back value in like the 3-4 turn area, unless you're somehow getting a falling Devon Achane. So we go Cooper Kupp, round 3. This was a spot where we get a falling Jalen Hurts. I'd be willing to take him late 3rd. We get him in the early 4th round. That's a price I'm willing to pay for Jalen Hurts. Continue to hammer wide receiver with T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson. Our running back 2 is once again going to be Brian Robinson. Then we go Cortland Sutton as our final wide receiver, our wide receiver 6. And then we get J.K. Dobbins in round 11. We obviously punted tight end in this one, so I went with my favorite late round option, Taysom Hill, and then Hunter Henry right after that. And then we wrap it up with Tyler Algier. So elite quarterback. Our running backs are obviously strong with this like double-headed start with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor. I think our wide receivers are fine, have a decent amount of depth. Tight end is obviously the weak point, but I think in terms of waiting to like, round 12, 13, not the worst option in Taysom Hill. Could be someone who like pretty much operates as a running back, but you're getting them like in that tight end designation. So those are going to be the 3 mock drafts here. Hopefully this video helps you guys go out, dominate your drafts here in 2024. If you do have any fantasy questions, you can drop them down below. You can also take a look at my top 80 rankings if you guys are interested. So thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.